Hello. Okay. So I am going to have you start this actually standing, but we'll be doing most of this little session on the floor. So for standing, you're really just kind of checking in. So you're just going to go ahead and stand up. And all I want you to do is twist, turn. So you're just going to keep your feet facing straight ahead, but you're just going to see how far your pelvis, your ribs, and your head all turn. And then back to the center, a couple times to each side, just turn. Where do you feel it? Low back, how's your knees, how's your neck, how are your shoulders? Just a couple, 3, 4 turns to each side. And then check the other side too. How is it for your feet? Do they stay on the floor easily? We're not doing too much with our feet today. We're really just mostly focusing on rotation of the spine. And you're just checking in before we start doing the little exercises, see how it feels to just stand and twist. Okay. All right. So first one is just basically an easy side-to-side motion. So you're just going to lay down on your back, knees bent, feet on the floor. So already if laying here you feel like at all uncomfortable, or you feel like your head is kind of stuck back in this position, even if you can't get your chin down and the back of your neck long here without some tension, then you probably want a little something under your head. So you could just take a pillow or a sweatshirt or anything you've got nearby and just stick it under your head if it felt uncomfortable to have nothing. Okay, so I felt fine without anything. I didn't feel like I was stuck here, so I'm just going to hang out without a pad, but grab one if you need one. Okay, so first we're just going to practice a really simple pelvic rotation. So we're going to rotate the pelvis. Our feet are kind of wide apart, a little wider than our hips. We're going to rotate the pelvis to the left and to the right. And just want to see how that feels. Is it easy? We'd like it to be pretty easy to keep both of the shoulder blades on the floor. So as you are turning, you also want to check in with what's turning. So are you mostly moving the legs, or are you actually turning the pelvis? And we want to play around with actually turning the pelvis. So turn your pelvis left. You'll almost end up on the outside of your left hip, and your right glute will come up off the floor. So how much can you turn your pelvis and still have your shoulder blades relaxed on the floor? And check the other side too. How much can you turn the pelvis? So I'm leaning onto my right hip out here, and this glute is totally up off the floor because I've turned, right? Now I could just lay here and move my legs around, but like my butt is still on the ground on this side. So that's another exercise, and it's a good one. But it's moving more at the hip, and we are working on moving at the spine. So turn your pelvis. Okay. And you can put your arms out to the sides, palms up. Might help to keep the shoulder blades down just because of the weight of the arms, but it also might give you a little stretch across your chest if you're tight there. Okay. So that's just a little bit of rotation. So we're going to make it a little bit more. We'll take the right ankle and cross it on top of the left thigh. Okay? So here I'm going to think about my right shoulder blade staying on the floor again. And as I go left, I'm really thinking about my pelvis turning. Pelvis turning, right shoulder blade on the floor, and then back to center. Now, it would be a different stretch if I only turn my pelvis to about here, and then I let my legs drift. Yeah, I'm feeling that differently. It's in kind of the outside of my hip. It's also feeling a little pinchy on the inside of my hip. So for this exercise, we are not moving our legs relative to our pelvis. We're moving them as if they're all stuck together and they don't move relative to each other. So this whole unit is being steered by the pelvis. So I'm again rotating onto the outside of my left hip, and the whole right glute is up off the floor because my pelvis is turning. And that should bring the sensation more around your waistline. Shouldn't really be in the low back, shouldn't really be in the outside of the hip. Okay? Now you can make this a little more if you want to add the arm. So you can reach the right arm up and keep anchoring the right shoulder blade. It just adds a little bit of a side stretch along with it. So this is sort of a working stretch. So as your pelvis rotates and your ribs are staying put, or your shoulder blade is staying put, and your arm is reaching up, it's taking all these tissues and stretching them, but it's also working them, it's loading them, because I'm not just going, yeah? So you're slowly going back and forth. Okay, let's switch and do the other side. Ankle up. And again, I'm going to think about turning my pelvis. My butt's going to come off the floor. Pelvis, pelvis, pelvis. I'm trying to let my left shoulder blade stay on the floor. And then back to center. And so if you tend to be tighter, I don't know if tighter is even the right word here, if your spine doesn't rotate that well, then you may find that you can't go all, so right now, this foot, for me, as I rotate my pelvis right, that foot is going all the way to the ground, and I'm keeping my left shoulder blade on the floor. If you don't have that much rotation in your spine, you might not be able to get that far. Or you might have to cheat. You might get this far with your pelvis, and then again, if I don't move my pelvis, but I like mess with my legs, I get a little pinchy here, I get kind of a stretch out here, I'm feeling it pulling in my low back. So I can make it go further, but I'm not rotating anymore. So make sure you try to keep that rotation pure. Pelvis traveling, 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 legs just staying right in the pelvis where they started. They're not moving relative to it. They're just moving because it's moving. And then back to center. And then if you want to make it a little bit more, you can reach the left arm up overhead, still keeping the left shoulder blade on the floor. It shouldn't take a lot of force. Rotate the pelvis, 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 pelvis. And then coming back. And each side might feel different. I'm having a hard time keeping it out of a hip stretch here and keeping it here because I tend to be less, it's harder for me to rotate my pelvis this way. So I'm just going to really focus on being aware of what I'm actually doing. There we go. Now I'm really just thinking about rotating my pelvis around, and it's definitely starting to load up my torso a little bit more, my core muscles. And just a couple more. Rotating the pelvis, slow and controlled. A lot of people will want to drop that knee in. Try, if anything, you could maybe even press it out a little bit to keep that from happening, and that'll also bring it a little more into here. In particular, if you're feeling any pinching in your inner hip, you're most likely traveling in too far with your knee. Keep your knee out. Okay. All right, so before we do the bigger, more complete spinal twist, we're gonna mobilize our thoracic spine a little bit. So you wanna have something. I'm gonna use a half dome, but you can also use a folded up pillow, a foam roller, rolled up sleeping bag. So we've done this one before. You're gonna put this right underneath your shoulder blades, toward the lower part of your shoulder blades. And you're gonna put your head in your hands. I like to do it with my legs out because then I'm also getting a little bit of hip release rather than kind of staying in this position that we're in a lot of the time as a short flexed hip. So, but if this is uncomfortable for you or you feel this go into your low back at all, it's probably a better idea to have your knees bent. So you're gonna hold your head in your hands. You're gonna pull the base of your skull away from your neck. Not forward into flexion, but back. You're trying to pull your head away from your neck. And then you're gonna go back and forward, side to side, and we're gonna rotate a little. So you're gonna turn and then turn. So as I turn to my right, I'm rolling onto my right shoulder blade, and my left one is coming off the half dome. Back and forward, side bend, the whole time. Notice I'm keeping the back of my neck long, using my arms to do that. And then rotating. So we're just trying to mobilize that thoracic spine, which is where the half dome is. Just because that tends to be a sticky spot for a lot of us. And if you think about your spine from all the way up here to all the way down to the sacrum and the tailbone, you want there to be rotation all the way up, and you can imagine you wouldn't just want to be rotating from here to here in that part of your spine, or just from here to here. We would want the thoracic spine to also be rotating a bit as well. Okay, so now we're going to squiggle down toward the feet, so that now the half dome's just a little bit higher up the shoulder blades, and we're going to do the same thing. Keep the back of the neck long. Go back and forward a little bit. Go side to side. And a little rotation. So if you can, you're keeping your pelvis on the floor for this rotation, and you're really, for all of these little moves on the half dome here, we're trying to imagine that the only place we're really moving is at the half dome. So it's that part of your spine. Of course, other stuff is moving along with it, but it's that part of your spine that we're trying to sort of unstick. And one more spot. I'm going to swiggle down a little bit more. So I'm now right at the top of my shoulder blades, keeping the back of my neck long, back and forward, side to side. And I'm using the half dome, but you really could use like a rolled up sleeping bag or just something that lifts that part of your spine up off the floor. A pillow would be fine, because you're still having to move over and around it, and you can still mobilize that part of your spine a little bit. Okay, so we get that out of the way, and we're gonna go for a bigger twist. So you're gonna take your pelvis, lift it up, and scoot it a few inches to your right. Put it back down. Put your left leg out long. So we scooted the pelvis right. We're going to put the left leg out long. We're going to bring the right leg up to like a 90-degree angle. Right leg is up. Right arm is up. Okay? Just like in the other exercises, we're rolling the pelvis. Okay? So you're going to think about lifting the right glute, that's over here, up off the floor as you roll your pelvis to the left, as if you were going to end up laying on your left side of that pelvis, your left hip. It would look like a bigger pose and a bigger twist if you let your leg go across your midline. Okay? Don't do that. That's where you're really, so where I feel that's not, going to hurt me, but it just feels like I'm kind of stretching through here, sort of from the low back around the butt, And again, it's just not what we're after. It also feels kind of pinchy in here by my groin because I've taken my pelvis over only to here, and then I'm like, oh, look at how far I can twist my spine, when really I'm just pinching my hip joint, okay? So don't cross the leg over the midline of your body. Turn the whole pelvis, and then back to center. And so just practice that a couple of times. See if you can keep your right shoulder blade anchored while you do that. The right glute comes up, and you roll the pelvis as far to the left as you can with the right shoulder blade on the floor. Now, as we take this a little bit further, we are going to allow that shoulder blade to come off the floor, but we're kind of thinking about trying to ground it, like it wants to stay down even if it's not going to. Okay, so now we're going to add the arm in. So now the right arm is up, the right leg is up. We're going to lift the right glute up off the floor and roll onto the left half of the pelvis while the arm reaches to the right. And that's going to also help keep your right shoulder blade grounded. And you should feel, again, the load through your core muscles, like a twisting, working stretch. And then back to the center. Let your head and neck do whatever feels natural and comfortable. People ask a lot, which way should I turn my head? I would just kind of rest it in the middle. If it feels good to you to turn and look at your hand, or if it feels better to look the other way, it's fine. We're not over worrying about that part right now. Make sure you're breathing. Okay, so another way to make this a little more work, if you wanted to, would be to add a weight in this hand. Even like a can of soup or something, if you don't have a hand weight, just a little bit of a load is going to add work to your core. Let's go ahead and switch sides. So bend both the knees again, and now we're going to shift our pelvis to the left, put the right leg out long, and lift the left leg up. Okay, so first we're just practicing rolling the pelvis and keeping the left shoulder blade on the floor. So you're lifting the left glute up off the floor and rolling over onto the right hip while keeping this shoulder blade down. So if you are feeling, as you practice this, if you're feeling any strain or even stretch in the lower back, and you've checked and you're not misusing the leg, you might want a little bit of a lift for your head and or shoulders. It may be that you're stuck in sort of a rib thrusty position, right, like this. And you can imagine if you're stuck kind of like this or like this, and then you go to twist, you're going to be kind of compressing and it won't be as comfortable. So a way to take care of that is just to take a pillow and either put it under your head. You can try it like that. Yeah, and if that's enough help and that takes it out of any discomfort or compressive or pinchy feeling in here, then that might be enough. But it may be that your spine is really stuck in a little bit of a kyphosis position. And then you want to also put that pillow a little bit under the tops of your shoulders. And you could add a little bit more under the head. And then you're going to lift the butt up and over. We can add the arm. And then back to center. So if you felt fine without the prop and you didn't feel like you were lifting your ribs way up or arching your low back too much, then you might be fine without the prop. But if you did feel any discomfort around that low back, just prop yourself up a little bit. And you could add a weight here if you want to. Lifting up with this part of the pelvis, rolling over, and the arm going out. Most of the sensation should be through your core. And let's do one more. Up and over. Oops. Make sure you're breathing. Okay. Same deal goes for the prop with any of these twists. If you have that sort of forward curve in your thoracic spine, you might just need to prop when you twist for now, and that's fine. You know, that little bit of work over the half dome that we did is going to slowly but surely start to unstick that twist, hopefully, for you. But for now, there's nothing wrong with having a little bit of help underneath here. Okay, so those are just sort of 3 versions of some spinal rotation. And then we're going to stand up and see, did it change anything about the way I was standing and rotating? So, stand up and turn. Turn your pelvis, turn your ribs, turn your head. And notice knee, back, shoulders, neck. Maybe you feel a little more freedom. Maybe you feel a little more upright. Definitely feels a little easier to me now that I've rotated my spine a little bit to actually do it standing. All right. Hopefully that was helpful, and I will see you soon. Have a good day.